nearly 20-year-old murder case in central Georgia could finally come to a close because of a former nanny who finally came forward.
It started like any other quiet morning in Douglas, Georgia. The air was warm, the small town streets calm, and inside John's Sports Park, a family-run arcade, the lights flickered on as 39-year-old Doris Worrell began her day. She was the kind of woman people remembered, hardworking, kind, always with a polite smile. But that smile would be gone by noon. When police arrived, they walked into what looked like a robbery. A broken glass door, a few bills missing from the register, and a woman lying motionless on the floor. Her husband, John, told them he just stepped out for errands and came back to find his wife dead. He sounded shocked, heartbroken. But the more detectives looked around, the more the story started to fall apart. No forced entry, no struggle, jewelry still on her wrist, purse untouched. Whoever did this wasn't after money, they were after Doris. And yet, for almost 2 decades, no one was arrested until one day, when a voice from the past finally broke the silence. This is the story of love turned poison, of secrets, lies, and a husband who thought he could outlast time itself. John and Doris Worrell were known all across Douglas. They ran John's Sports Park, a cheerful family arcade filled with go-karts, birthday parties, and neon lights. On weekends, you could hear laughter echoing across the parking lot. Parents trusted them. Kids adored them. John was the talkative businessman, charming, confident, always networking. Doris was the quiet strength behind it all, keeping the books, managing staff, making sure everything ran smoothly. To everyone else, they were the perfect couple, successful, grounded, but behind closed doors, things were falling apart. Friends later said Doris had been different lately, distant, tired, nervous. She avoided eye contact when John was around. When someone asked if she was okay, she simply said, "I'm just tired." But those who knew her best could tell something was wrong. What no one realized was that her marriage, the one everyone admired, had become her prison. September 20th, 2006. It was a normal Wednesday morning. Doris opened the arcade around 9. John said he had errands to run, and as usual, he left her to handle the business. She was supposed to meet someone later that afternoon, but she never made it. At 11:17 a.m., a call came into 911. Someone had found Doris inside the sports park, shot in the head. She was already gone. Police arrived to a scene that just didn't make sense. There were coins scattered on the floor, a cash drawer left open, and a few dollars missing, but not enough to call it a robbery. Her purse and phone were still there, her wedding ring still on her finger. Nothing valuable had been taken, except her life. When John arrived, he broke down in front of the officers. He said he'd been gone less than 2 hours, that he had no idea what could have happened. He looked devastated, but detectives couldn't ignore one thing. The crime scene felt staged. The so-called robbery was too clean, too convenient, and John's reaction, dramatic, but oddly precise, felt rehearsed. Still, there was no weapon, no witnesses, no fingerprints, just questions, and one uneasy husband. As investigators dug deeper, a darker story began to unfold. Doris had been struggling in her marriage. Friends told police she was considering divorce, even consulting a lawyer about custody of their children. She'd said John could be controlling, that she was scared of what he might do if she left. But that wasn't the only surprise. Police learned that John had recently hired a young live-in nanny named Paula Yarberry to help care for the kids. At first, she was just an employee, but soon, John and Paula's relationship became the talk of the town. They were seen together constantly, running errands, having lunch, taking trips without Doris. People whispered. Doris stayed quiet. When detectives interviewed Paula, she denied everything. She said John was a kind boss and a family friend, but her hands trembled. Her answers felt cautious, measured, and her eyes, full of something between guilt and fear, told a different story. The picture was getting clearer. A failing marriage, a possible affair, and a wife who wanted out. The question now was, who wanted to make sure she never left? In the months following the murder, investigators interviewed everyone who worked at John's sports park. That's when two names came up again and again: Brandon Cage and Glidden Rodriguez, two young men who helped maintain the place. Rumor had it John had once asked them if they knew someone who could take care of a problem. At first, they thought it was a joke, but after Doris's murder, those words hit differently. Police brought them in for questioning. Both denied being involved, but the story about John asking for help stayed consistent. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough hard evidence to connect anyone to the killing. The murder weapon was gone. There was no forensic proof, no eyewitnesses, and without a confession, the case went cold. It was heartbreaking. A woman was dead, the community was shaken, and her killer was walking free. And then, just months later, John did something no grieving husband would normally do. He left town. Not long after the investigation stalled, John sold the business. He packed up the family and moved to Florida. The move itself was strange enough, but what shocked everyone was who went with him: the nanny, Paula. Within a year, they were married. To the people of Douglas, it looked suspicious. To Doris's family, it felt like betrayal. The man who had cried at her funeral was now building a new life with another woman, the same woman who had been living under their roof before Doris died. For years, John lived quietly. New town, new wife, new life. He blended in, ran small businesses, went to church, raised his children, and all the while, Doris's murder sat buried under time and distance. But what John didn't know was that investigators hadn't given up. The case file may have gathered dust, but it never truly closed. Fast forward to 2024. Nearly 19 years after Doris's death, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation decided to reopen the case under their cold case unit. A new team, with new technology and fresh eyes, began re-examining everything. When they went back through the original witness statements, something stood out: inconsistencies in John's timeline. Phone records didn't match his story. His supposed errands had unexplained gaps, and his vehicle was spotted near the park far later than he claimed. And then came the real breakthrough. An old investigator mentioned a forgotten detail. Years earlier, one of John's employees, Glidden Rodriguez, had told an officer that John offered him money to rough someone up. That lead had gone nowhere back then, but now it fit perfectly into the new picture they were building. The last piece came from someone no one expected: John's second wife, Paula. By 2025, Paula had divorced John and was living quietly on her own. When investigators tracked her down again, she finally spoke. What she revealed changed everything. She said John had always been terrified of losing custody of his kids. He'd often call Doris the problem and would say things like, "If she's gone, everything gets easier." He was obsessed with control, his business, his image, his family. And when Doris threatened to leave, he saw it as betrayal. Paula claimed she didn't know about the murder until after it happened, but she remembered the way John acted that morning: restless, cold, pacing. When the call came in that Doris was dead, he didn't react with shock. She said he just whispered, "It's done." That was enough. With her testimony, phone data, and witness accounts, the GBI finally had enough evidence to move. On May 23, 2025, police in Missouri knocked on John Worrell's door. He was 58 years old. The man who had escaped justice for nearly 2 decades stood there, silent, as agents read him his rights. When they told him he was under arrest for his wife's murder, he looked at them and said, "After all this time?" Yes, after all this time. John was charged with malice murder, felony murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and aggravated battery. He was extradited back to Georgia to finally face the crime he thought he'd buried forever. The town of Douglas was stunned. Some said they always suspected him. Others were in disbelief. But for Doris's family, it was the closure they'd been waiting for. Her sister told reporters, "It doesn't bring her back, but it finally lets her rest. 19 years later, the truth had caught up. After the arrest, old wounds reopened. People revisited that day in 2006. The morning laughter stopped echoing at the park. John's Sports Park is long gone now, demolished years ago, but locals say that patch of ground still feels cold, like it remembers. What makes this story so haunting isn't just the murder itself, but the way it sat hidden behind everyday life. A husband running businesses, smiling for family photos, pretending nothing had happened. For 19 years, he fooled everyone. But the truth has patience, and justice, no matter how long it takes, always finds a way home. When love turns into obsession, the line between devotion and destruction blurs fast. Doris wanted peace, a normal life for her and her children. Instead, she became the victim of a man who refused to let go. Her story reminds us that evil doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes, it comes from the person sitting right next to you, smiling, holding your hand, planning your end. It took 19 years, but the silence finally broke. The lies collapsed, and the man who thought he'd buried the truth discovered that time doesn't erase guilt. It only delays justice. If you've stayed with me through this case, you've just seen how far people will go to hide the truth and how far justice will go to uncover it. The murder of Doris Worrell is a reminder that even the calmest towns hold the darkest secrets. You're watching Crime Zone, where we dig deep into the stories that others forgot. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. I will see you in the next video.